So I was helping the kid with some math homework. I often use my Texas Instrument calculator to solve equations, but I thought I'd give ChatGTP a try and came up with a very interesting situation where ChatGTP initially got an incorrect answer for a relatively simple math problem, and then I was able to prompt it into correcting itself. But I think it's very interesting, so I'm going to talk about what happened. So I asked it to solve the equation 3x squared plus 7x minus 20 equals 0. ChatGTP started working on it by using the quadratic formula, which is a perfectly acceptable way to go about solving it. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. We all remember that from junior high or high school. And it substituted variables correctly. And we see here it's trying to figure out the square root of 7 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 20. And here's where it goes wrong. It computes this as the square root of 169. That is wrong. It's the square root of 289. In other words, when you square 7 and then subtract 4 times 3 times negative 20, you get a negative number here, obviously. So it's minus a minus, so it's plus. That's why you get 289, not 169. And once it gets 169 here, it just continues on and ends up with the wrong answers. So I tell it, your answer is wrong. Here's how ChatGTP responds. I apologize for the mistake in my previous response. Here's the corrected solution. And as you can see, square root of 169, it does the exact same thing wrong again, which had me a little bit perplexed. I thought maybe I put in something wrong, but I checked again on my Texas Instruments calculator and everything was fine. So I told it what it did wrong. I said, no, you are miscalculating 7 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 20. It is not 169. That was enough for ChatGTP to figure out and correct itself. It said, I apologize again for the mistake in my previous response. You are correct that 7 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 20 is not equal to 169. Here's the corrected solution. And skipping ahead, here you can see now it's figured out that this here is 289, square root of 289, and then it goes about and ultimately gets the correct answers. The solutions to the equation are x equals 5/3 and x equals negative 4, which I confirmed with my calculator. So I always like to prod the machine while we still can before they become our overlords. And I say, okay, you're a computer. How did you get it wrong? That is pathetic. And the answer, I think, is interesting, and especially when you consider how a model like ChatGTP works versus just straight up algorithmic programming, such as would exist in my Texas Instruments calculator. As an AI language model, I do not have feelings and I'm not capable of feeling shame or embarrassment. Well, apparently that's in response to my telling it that it was pathetic. Anyways, I apologize for the mistakes in my previous responses, and I will make sure to double check my calculations in the future to provide you with accurate solutions. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Well, that's not really an answer. Explain why you made that mathematical mistake, which I think is a valid question. How did the computer make a mathematical mistake? The mistake I made was due to human error in the process of transcribing the equation and calculating its solution. Now that makes no sense to me whatsoever. What human error? I didn't make any mistakes. Who's the human here that made the error? So that was kind of a bizarre answer. The mistake I made was due to human error in the process. So there was no human involved. How could it be human error? But here's where I think the real insight into not only telling me that there was human error, but also the key thing being that it's a language model. As a language model, I do not inherently have the ability to make errors, but I rely on the accuracy of the input I receive from the user. In this case, I made an error when manually entering the equation into the calculator. That makes no sense. What calculator? And how did it manually enter it? So that's kind of a bizarre hallucination. This resulted in an incorrect solution being generated, which was then provided to you. I apologize for any confusion this may have caused, and we'll be more careful. And so, what's interesting is what's going on here is that as a language model, it's using language and language patterns to explain how a mistake was made. Now, I don't know 100% what went wrong in the initial approach that ChatGTP took. It may have been trained on incorrect data. From what I understand, it was trained on a lot of internet websites. So there could be one or more significant websites that use the quadratic formula incorrectly, or the use of parentheses and layers in the order of operations, and making sure that a minus, a negative is a positive, that when it tried to understand how to do mathematics, it may have had bad input data, or it may have tried to reason things through rather than having been programmed. Like, for example, my text instrument calculator, it doesn't do any reasoning. It just is hard-coded algorithmically through software how to do things, and it is what it is. Rather, it doesn't try and figure anything out. So here, ChatGTP was, I'm just guessing, trying to, based on examples or descriptions of how to use the quadratic formula, or how to deal with numbers in parentheses and minus a negative sign and so on, and it may have just gotten too complicated where then it started to make mistakes and didn't do it correctly. So I think it's very interesting, that part of it, how it got the answer wrong, but then also to explain its own mistakes as some sort of human error also shows how a language model goes about trying to explain things rather than just not really having a self-awareness of what actually went wrong. Instead, it's just following how one word typically follows another, and how sentences and thoughts are constructed, and just kind of spits out nonsense that would be a good answer from a human, right? If you asked a human or asked a student, well, how'd you get that wrong? How'd you get 169 instead of 289? That would have been a perfectly good answer. But it's not a good answer, and it's not a truthful answer when it's coming from ChatGTP. And I'm not upset about that. I'm just pointing out, and here's, again, the key thing. It's a language model, which is different from other kinds of models, but trying to apply it to mathematics, I guess, you get some interesting results. Now, what I find very interesting is that I know a lot of students supposedly use ChatGPT for homework. Unfortunately, probably also for cheating. You hear about that a lot. And I did Google a little bit and tried on YouTube as well to see if anyone else had trouble with ChatGTP solving quadratic equations, and didn't come up with anything. So I still think maybe the way I entered the problem may have been part of the issue, but I'm still a little confused as what entirely went wrong. It's still surprising, even though, again, it's not a calculator per se. How did it get this wrong? And then I forgot, the conversation did go on. What human error, I asked. As an AI language model, I do not have personal experiences or memories, so I cannot recall exactly what caused the human error that led to the mistake in my previous response. Again, I don't know what that means. It seems to be saying it made a human error, which doesn't make sense. What it could mean is that some human made an error in the data that it was trained on. However, it says, I can speculate that it may have been a typo or a calculation mistake made during the process of generating the solution. I don't think that's the case. I think that it made it was trained on bad data, or it's just trying to explain it in human terms what went wrong. But again, I don't think that's quite the same thing. Regardless of the cause, I apologize for the error and will take steps to prevent similar mistakes from occurring in the future. It's interesting to know, is that a lie? That will it actually take steps to prevent similar mistakes from occurring in the future? Will it remember my example and apply it to others? I don't know, or if it's just spewing out something that it thinks should be said. And then I say, it seems I can't trust you to do math. It's not true. I mean, for the most part, it's pretty accurate, and I've asked it to do a lot of complex things, and it solved them. And again, I was surprised at what happened in this case. I understand your frustration, blah, blah, blah. As an AI language model, my responses are generated based on the input provided to me. I'm not perfect, blah, blah, blah. It apologizes, and so on. And then I went on and had it do some other problems, and I think it got other quadratics correct after that. So, anyways, I'll end this here. Very interesting as we're all exploring ChatGTP and other models and seeing some of the funny things it did. This one, I guess, was just bizarre because it's math, and you would think that if a computer model can do anything correct, you'd think it'd be math, but and it ultimately did get the right answer, but it needed my help. So, good luck and fun with ChatGTP, and if anybody has a deeper explanation of what happened here, I'd love to hear about it. Please leave a comment.